Welcome to the fifth episode of Writing with Authors. I'm your host and three-time published author, Vincent A. Lanci.
I'm Katie O Grady. I'm a writer, teacher, and artist who is very interested in mental health.
The show will continue to interview writers in all forms to help you with your writing journey. You may recognize today's guest from my podcast series, A Mental Health Break, and she is streaming in from Canada. A teacher by day, she has experience with many forms of writing. She mostly writes self-help stories rooted in creative nonfiction that draws up on humor, anecdotes, memories, philosophy, and psychology. Allow me to now introduce Katie O Grady. Katie, thank you so much for joining me on another platform.
My pleasure. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you again for joining. And would you mind giving your quick introduction to our audience without giving away too much of your writing endeavors?
So I'm an English and math and art teacher in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. And I recently began making writing a priority. It was one of those silver linings of the pandemic where I had time to put it first. And I've been received quite well on platforms like Medium and Twitter, in the hashtag writing community there. And so now I am selling some of my work and publishing articles online, as well as working on two memoirs.
Yes, I know you've been extremely busy, so I think it will be a great time to discuss your latest project.
So I would say my latest, most important project would be the memoir about my journey with both anorexia and obesity, and finally finding stability. And I've achieved, I would say at this point, long-term stability that is here to stay. And now it's time to share my journey so that I can help others and maybe help people avoid some of the pitfalls that I experienced. And in my memoir, I go into not only the physiology and some of the science education that I really needed to know about my body and the human body in general, but also the psychological elements and the multifaceted process of healing from childhood trauma.
Yes, and I want to thank you for your courage sharing your story. The vulnerable moments help others get through theirs. How long did this project take you? How long have you been working on this?
So that's the funny thing. I was so afraid to start, and I think many writers can attest to that. And I had a lot of fear of failure, to be honest, because I really love writing. And so I was afraid of failing at the thing I'm most passionate about. But I started like once the pandemic hit, so probably around April 2020, and I didn't even write for the whole time. I took a break. So in about 2 months of writing every day, I had about half of a book done. And that one I is actually more it's fictional, but it's informed from my personal experiences. And then I wanted to put the fiction aside, and in January I started the memoir, and I'm about halfway done, and I expect to finish by the summer. So it's kind of amazing when the story is ready, it comes. And actually, the memoir starts by saying that the sensation was almost like ready to give birth. Like I couldn't hold off any longer. And I'm like, okay, this might not be the best time, but the story's coming. So my fingers are flying.
I think a lot of great advice for everybody that's watching this show. Get over your fears because a lot of good can come once you get over that hump. And a little bit day by day. Don't overwhelm yourself with thinking you have to write a whole book in one day. Jot piece by piece by piece, and eventually you'll have your masterpiece. So great advice, Katie. I have to ask, what led you to becoming a published author at first? And let's also discuss that first piece of published work.
So I mean, we're so lucky to live in the era we're living in, the technological era, because there are platforms where we can publish our work. I will, admit that that process of learning about the different platforms, mostly social media, but then there's the writing platform Medium, and learning about all the different online publications. Like that was a bit of a like a wobbly process, and I've since like developed a bit more of a strategy where now I've separated my commercial work from my artistic and creative work, and I've made the personal and professional decision to take down my more creative artistic pieces from online platforms because they are so important to me and I do want to see them in print one day. And I have been told that, sometimes some work can be stolen online. We don't have to be paranoid, but just if something's precious, I decided, okay, that's going to go another avenue. And so now I mostly write commercial work in the areas of self-help and healing, a bit about writing itself and marketing and branding as a writer, especially on social media. My last piece was about that. And then basically, I found online publications that are willing to buy my work, and they purchase the article, and then we jointly promote it, myself on my social media platforms and them on theirs. So it's quite a great system.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on to share your journey through writing. Like you said, there's been so many stops along the way, but you've also had to do a lot of learning along the way. What two pieces of advice could you give to our fellow authors and aspiring writers?
I would say number one is basically the first point we touched on. Like, just start, and you hear it every day. You hear it every day. I had to hear it for many years before I actually listened. But once you start, you like literally what's going through my head is like, what was I so afraid of? And why didn't I start 10 years ago? It doesn't matter if you fail. The main thing that matters is you're doing it because it brings you joy. And if it's bringing you joy, people honestly gravitate towards that. My Twitter account went from literally 89 followers to it's approaching 3,000 in 2 weeks because someone saw my article and was like, oh my gosh, this is great. And a bunch of writers in the writing community started to support me and follow me. So if you love something, people see that and people gravitate towards it. And then the second piece of advice would be like the second point we touched on actually about, but have a strategy and be a professional and don't be afraid to be like a boss man or a boss lady. Like I feel like writers and teachers and artists, we're sort of socially conditioned into being taught we have to be like meek and like, oh, accepting of whatever crumbs we're willing to be given. But I started to like believe in my work, and I stopped giving it away for free and was like, no, I would like it to be purchased because it's valuable. And so don't be afraid to assert yourself and go hunting online for publications that are willing to give you compensation that you deserve. Artists deserve to be compensated for our work. So those are my two pieces of advice.
Great piece of advice. Maybe I'll ask you to delve a little deeper here. Could you steer our audience with maybe one resource you found, one publication source that will compensate you for your work?
Yeah, I would say Better Humans is really good. And yeah, I've published with them a few times now, and they don't always purchase the work. But if you select that you're only willing to have your work purchased by them, then that is their only choice. A few times I was interested in maintaining the rights to my work, so I selected that I would actually like to keep it because it had personal photos and a personal story. So if they don't buy it, the upside is you keep the rights. And when you apply on their website, you can just put in Better Humans, publication submission, and you go through the process and you tick the boxes.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And now I'd like to ask you to please share your contact information, ways to find your books, published pieces of work. How can our listeners engage with you?
Yeah, so my handle is the same across the board. It's at Katie with an IE, O Grady with a Y, Lady with a Y. So Katie at Katie O'Grady Lady on Instagram, on Twitter, on Medium, and on Facebook, I'm Katie O Grady.
Thank you for sharing that. Is there anywhere particular we can see your work?
The best places to see it are my pinned tweets on Twitter. That actually right now has current paintings about the medical world. And then you can see my article on Medium articles.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Katie. And thank you so much for joining on another platform. And I will see all of you on the next episode of Writing with Authors.